All right, so this is the last piece of this unit. So it wants you to examine those that are against imperialism and kind of look at the Opium Wars, the Boxer Rebellion, and the Indian Revolt. So basically, the standard wants you to see what resistance to imperialism looked like, what resistance to these nations like Britain and France coming in and taking over looks like. A lot of times it breaks out in civil war or just a war in general, all right? A lot of times these imperial countries would come in and take over, and then the nations that they took over have to kind of rely on them for things like equipment or food or supplies. And this creates tension between the imperialists. It creates resentment towards those imperialistic nations because a lot of times they'll withhold it and they want the people to do things. And so one thing you can kind of think of is like Star Wars and the Imperial Empire taking over all these planets and forcing them under their thumb and making them do things they don't want to do. Okay, so the Opium Wars take place in China, as does the Boxer Rebellion. So here's the thing. The British found opium in China, and so they would take it and they would sell it. A lot of times they would sell it to the Chinese workers, and a lot of times these workers, they wouldn't do the job well, or they'd get fired, or they'd lose their position, or whatever. And it basically, killed the economy in China. So the rulers in China found where the British were storing the opium in this warehouse. They went and took it, and they just destroyed all of it. And so that's where the war breaks out. And there's several opium wars, not just the one. The Boxer Rebellion takes place in China. And this woman requests the assistance of the secret martial arts brotherhood, who fights to push the foreigners out of China. They don't win. They're destroyed. But these boxers are rising up against the imperialistic people that are coming into China. And then the last one here is the Indian Revolt in the 1850s. So when the British came into India and took over, they forced the natives to serve in their military and be soldiers for them, which for one causes resentment because, they don't want to fight for the imperialistic British, but they're forced to, or they can die, or their families are destroyed. And the British didn't treat the Indians very well. In fact, they ignored their traditions and customs. They treated them awfully. And there were rumors floating around that the British were putting sacred meats into the Indian soldiers' food that they weren't supposed to eat based on their religious customs. And so the Indians will eventually rise up and revolt against the British as well. Okay, so that's kind of the end of this unit, but if you look in the Nearpod and you listen to the questions in class, it asks you to kind of think about the content. Where do you see these things relevant today? Does this stuff happen today? It does. And where can you see it? How do you see it? All right.